Brian found it was a long way from sparks to fire. Clearly there had to be something for the sparks to ignite, some kind of tinder or kindling, but what? He brought some dried grass in, taped sparks onto it, and watched them die. He tried small twigs, breaking them into little pieces, but that was worse than the grass. He tried the combination of the two grass and twigs. Nothing. He had no trouble getting sparks, but the tiny bit of hot stone or metal, he couldn't tell which they were, just sputtered and died. He settled back on his haunches in exasperation, looking for a pitiful clump of grass and twigs. He needed something finer, something soft, fine, and fluffy to catch on bits of fire. I like the word fluffy. Okay. Shredded paper would be nice, but he had no paper. So close, he said aloud, so close. He put the hatchet in his belt and went out to the shelter, limping on his sore leg. There had to be something, had to be. Man had made fire. There had been fire for thousands, millions of years. There had to be a way. He dug in his pockets and found a $20 bill in his wallet. Paper. Worthless paper out here. But if he could get a fire going, he ripped the 20 into tiny pieces and made a pile of pieces and hit the sparks into them. Nothing happened. They just wouldn't take the sparks. But there had to be a way, some way of doing it. Not 20 feet to his right, leaning over the water, were birches, and he stood looking at them for a full half minute before they registered on his mind. They were a beautiful white with bark like clean, slightly speckled paper. Paper. He moved to the trees, where the bark was peeling, and the trunks in it lifted into tiny tendrils, almost fluffs. Brian plucked some of them loose, rolled them in his fingers. They seemed flammable, dry, and nearly powdery. He pulled and twisted bits off the trees, packing them in one hand while he picked at them with the other, picking and gathering until he had a wad close to the size of a baseball. Then he went back into the shelter and arranged the ball of birch bark peelings at the base of the black rock. As an afterthought, he threw the remains of his $20 bill. He struck, and with a steam of sparks, they fell into the bark and quickly died. But this time, one spark fell on the small hair of a dry bark, almost a thread of a bark, and it seemed to glow a bit brighter before it died. The material had to be finer. There had to be a soft and incredible fine nest for the sparks. I must make a home for the sparks, he thought, a perfect home where they won't stay. They won't make fire. He started ripping at the bark, using his fingernails at first, and when it didn't work, he used the sharp edge of the hatchet, cutting the bark in thin slivers, hairs so fine that they would almost not be there. But it was painstaking work, slow work, and he had stayed with it for over 2 hours. Twice he stopped for a handful of berries, and once to go onto the lake for a drink. Then back to work, and the sun made his back until on his back until at last he had a big fluff as big as a grapefruit, dry birch bark fluff. He positioned the spark nest, as he thought about it, at the base of the rock, and used the thumb to make a small depression in the middle. He slammed the hatchet slammed the hatchet down across the black rock. A cloud of sparks rained down, most of them missing the nest, but some, perhaps 30 or so, hit the depression, and of those 6 or 7 found fuel and grew. Smoldering caused the bark to take on a red glow. Then they went out. Close. He was close. He repositioned the nest and drew a new and smaller dent with his thumb, and struck again. More sparks, a slight glow, then nothing. It's me, he thought. I'm doing something wrong. I don't know how to do this. A cave dweller would have had a fire by now. A Cro-Magnon man would have had a fire by now. But I don't know this. I don't know how to make a fire. Maybe not enough sparks. He settled the nest in place, and once more hit the rock with a series of blows as fast as he could. The sparks poured like a golden waterfall. At first they seemed to take. There were several. Many sparks found life and took it briefly, but they all died, starved. He leaned back. They are like me. They're starving. It wasn't the quantity. There were plenty of sparks, but they needed more. I would kill, he thought suddenly, for a book of matches. Just one book, just one match, I would kill. What makes fire, he thought. He went back to school and all those science classes where he learned to make a fire. Did the teacher ever stand up there and say, "This is what makes a fire"? He shook his head. He tried to focus on the thoughts. What did it take? You have to have fuel, he thought, and he had that. The bark was fuel. Oxygen, there had to be air. He needed to add air. He had to fan on it, blow on it. He made the nest ready again, held the hatchet backwards, tensed and struck 4 quick blows. Sparks came down and leaned forward as fast as he could and blew. Too hard. They were bright, almost intense glow, and then they were gone. He had blown it out. Another set of strikes, more sparks. He leaned and blew, but gently this time, holding back and aiming the stream of air from his mouth to hit the brightest spots. 5 or 6 sparks had fallen in a tight mass of black hair. Brian centered his efforts there. The sparks grew with his gentle breath. The red glow moved from the sparks themselves into the bark, moved and grew, became worms, glowing red worms, and crawled up the bark hairs and caught the other threads and bark until there was a big red as a ball. There was a pocket of red as big as a ball, a glowing red coal of heat. And when he ran out of breath and paused to inhale, the red ball suddenly burst into flames. "Fire!" he yelled. "I've got fire! I got it! I got it! I got it!" But the flames were thick and oily and burning fast, consuming the ball as fast as they were gasoline. He had to feed the flames, keep them going, work them as fast as he could. He carefully placed dried grass and the wood pieces he had tried at first on top of the bark and was gratified to see them take. But it would go out fast. He needed more and more. He could not let the flames go out. He ran from the shelter to the pines and started breaking off low, dead, small limbs, and these he threw in the shelter, went back for more, threw in those, squatted to break and feed the hungry flames. When the small wood was gone, he went out and found larger wood, and did not relax until that was going. Then he leaned back against the wood brace of the door and the opening and smiled. "I have found a friend," he thought. "I have a friend now, a hungry friend, a good one. I have a friend named Fire. Hello, Fire." The curve of the rock back made the almost perfect drawing fuel and carried the smoke up through the cracks of the roof, but held in the heat. If he kept the small fire, it would be perfect and would keep anything like a porcupine from coming through the door again. A friend and a guard, he thought. So much for the little spark, a friend and a guard from a tiny spark. He looked around and wished that he had someone telling him this thing, to show the thing that he had done, but there was almost nobody. Nobody but the trees and the sun and the breeze and the lake. Nobody. And he thought rolling thoughts, with the smoke curling up over his head, and then the smile still half face, he thought, "I wonder what they're doing now. I wonder what my father is doing now. I wonder what my mother is doing now. I wonder if she is with him."